All right, today we are going deep. We're cracking open the private journal of a Roman emperor to try and figure out what was actually going on inside the mind of one of the most powerful people who ever lived. I mean, think about it. What if the most powerful man in the world, his ultimate secret weapon, wasn't his army or his wealth, but a little private journal? That's exactly the story of Marcus Aurelius and this incredible book he left behind, the Meditations. So let's just try to put ourselves in his shoes for a second. It's around 170 AD. He's not kicking back in a palace in Rome. No, he's on the brutal northern frontier, fighting barbarian tribes. And back home, a plague brought back by his own soldiers is absolutely devastating the empire. There's famine, and to top it all off, his most trusted general is about to betray him. So, in the middle of all this chaos, he sits down to write. But who is he writing to? Himself. That's the whole key. The book we call the Meditations, it was never meant for you or me to read. It doesn't even have an official title. It was his personal diary, a series of notes he wrote to himself to make sense of everything and, well, to coach himself on how to be a better person. So to really get what this book is all about, we have to understand the world it came from. And believe me, it was not a world of quiet marble palaces.
You see this little note here? It's from the start of Book 2, and it tells you everything you need to know. In the country of the Quadi at Granoa. Granoa, that's on a river in modern-day Slovakia, so he's writing this in a military tent, right? With the sounds of an army camp all around him, thousands of miles from home on a campaign that would drag on for years. This book wasn't written in peace. It was forged in fire.
And that fire, that pressure, it wasn't just on the battlefield. His entire time as emperor was basically one crisis after another.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It is relentless. First, you've got a war in the East, and to make it worse, his co-emperor is off partying instead of leading. Then, a pandemic comes home with the troops, the Antonine Plague, and it might have killed millions. Right after that, decades of grinding war kick off in the north. And just when it seems like he might get a break, his best general, Avidius Cassius, rebels. On top of all that, he outlives his wife, many of his children, and in the end, he leaves the empire to his absolutely terrible son, Commodus. It's just one thing after another. And this right here, this is the central paradox of his entire life. Publicly, his job description was warrior, judge, ruler of the known world. He had to be tough. But privately, in his journal, we see a man who is aiming for the complete opposite. He wanted gentleness, simplicity, and just some inner peace. So the question is, how on earth do you square that circle?
Well, he had a tool. He had a philosophy. But don't think of it as some dusty academic thing. For Marcus, Stoicism was like a practical operating system for his mind. It was the software he ran to handle all that chaos and stay sane. So what's the point of this OS? The Stoics had a goal, to live in conformity with nature. Now that sounds a bit strange, but what it really means is seeing the universe as a single ordered system, a cosmos. They believe that our ability to reason is a tiny spark of that universal reason. And our job, our whole purpose, is to use that spark to work with the system, not against it, for the good of everyone. Okay, that sounds pretty lofty, right? But when a plague is wiping out your citizens and armies are at the gates, what does that actually mean? In a world of total chaos, what can a person really control? And this is the Stoic superpower, right here, this razor-sharp distinction. Here's what's in your power: your judgments, your choices, your opinions, how you react to things. And here's what's not in your power. Literally everything else. Your health, your wealth, your reputation, what other people do, all of it. Marcus realized that the secret to peace was to pour every ounce of his energy into the things he could control, and to learn to accept the rest, whatever it might be.
And this wasn't just some clever mind trick, it was a whole system. It had 3 parts. First, physics. Understand how the universe actually works. Second, logic. Train your brain to think clearly and separate truth from nonsense. And finally, ethics. Take all that knowledge and apply it to how you actually live your life. This is the framework we see him using over and over again in his private notes. So yeah, the Meditations. Think of it as the raw data, the intimate record of Marcus running this mental operating system every single day. It's basically him talking himself through the absolute madness of his life. Just take this famous quote, for example. This is part of his morning routine. But notice, it's not some cheesy positive affirmation. It's the opposite. It's a kind of negative visualization. He's prepping himself, right? Okay, today I'm going to deal with annoying people, ungrateful people, backstabbing people. He's reminding himself that their behavior comes from their own ignorance, not pure evil.
And so getting angry about it is just a waste of his time.
Or how about this one? When someone does him wrong, and you can bet that happened constantly, his first thought isn't revenge. It's to coach himself. He writes that the best revenge is to not be like the person who wronged you. The only victory that matters is refusing to let their bad behavior corrupt your own character.
And you know, for all this talk about hardship, the very first part of the Meditations is just a long gratitude list. He goes through person by person and catalogs everything good he learned from them. Gentleness from his grandfather, piety from his mother, and from his teacher, Rusticus, this incredibly humble lesson that his own life needed fixing. This is the most powerful man on earth, starting his day by reminding himself of all the people he's indebted to. So when you put it all together, what you see is a man whose life was the ultimate testing ground for his beliefs. He didn't just read about these ideas in a book. He pressure tested them against actual war, plague, and betrayal. The Meditations isn't a book of theory. It's the field notes from the front lines of being human. But of course, he wasn't some perfect saint on a mountaintop. His reign is remembered for being just and stable, for sure, but it's also stained by the persecution of Christians, who he just didn't understand. He was a brilliant general, but all his work was basically undone by the terrible son he put in charge. He was a paradox, wasn't he? A good man trying to do the right thing in a brutal world, and his journal shows he never let himself forget that. And that's why this little book is still around 2,000 years later. We're not reading it for a history lesson on the Roman Empire. We read it because his struggles are our struggles. We all deal with frustration and loss and the fact that we're not going to be here forever. And in these pages, we get to see an emperor talking to himself and in turn talking to us about how to face it all with a little bit of grace and a whole lot of strength. And that really leaves us with just one last question. Marcus Aurelius found his anchor by writing to an audience of one, himself. In the middle of your own daily battles, with all the pressures and anxieties of modern life, who are you writing to?